I'm Rob Downey, a family practice MD and Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. I'm coming to you from Seaworthy Functional Medicine in Homer, Alaska. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. Today, we are fortunate enough to be joined by Debora Wayne, the founder and CEO of the International Chronic Pain Institute. She's an energy healer. She has many years of expertise, certification in hypnotherapy, psychology, chemical dependency, yoga, meditation, and an approach called high-speed healing. Welcome, Debora. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh my God, it is such a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me.
Very, very excited to do so. So we had some fun a moment ago kind of getting ready for today, and every week I get to meet my tribe. I've practiced in isolation for a lot of years, so I always have to try to stay focused and make sure I'm thinking about the best things to have you teach our audience. So educate us, if you would, about then how your work sort of evolved to where it is now and how it helps people with pain, fatigue, anxiety, mood.
So my work evolved because my health crashed and burned. And this is over 30 years ago now, where I woke up on a regular Monday morning where you just get dressed and go to work. But on that Monday, I found myself lying on the floor of my closet and I couldn't stop crying and I could not get dressed and I could not pretend everything was fine one more day. And I had been trying to figure out for a long time what was wrong with me. I had mystery pain, muscles, joints, my hair was falling out, I had ulcers, I couldn't eat anything, I couldn't sleep at night, I was taking a pill for everything. And I just couldn't go on anymore the way I was living. I was miserable, I was anxious, I was depressed, I just was out of answers and out of faking it. So on that day, I had a very unusual experience that I would call a spiritually transformative experience that I was not expecting. And it rocked my entire belief system of what's possible, what's real. And it came as a result of me screaming at the ceiling of the closet saying, if there's a God, if there's anything out there, I need help because I want to die. Whoa. Within seconds, and I mean seconds, and I had not stopped crying all morning. I felt this palpable field of what I would call energy and peacefulness come over me. It filled the closet. It was not something I was imagining. It was real. And I immediately had this sense that everything was going to be okay. I stopped crying. I felt inner peace. I got up. I went in the other room. I picked up the phone and I called someone and I said, I need to talk to you and I need help. And I started on a journey that I didn't expect that literally caused me to unlearn and relearn and experiment and explore out of the box that I had been raised to think about healing, about health, about everything. And I grew up in a medical family, and it was always about show me the data. And I had no data to show here. All I had was an experience that has literally over the years led me to be able to help tens of thousands of people in over 160 countries. I discovered physics, energy, healing, and it was all just so out of my way of normal thinking. But that's what led me here today. And, it's a long story of many things have happened over the years, but it truly revealed to me. And that's the key word, it revealed. It wasn't something I read in a book. It revealed the truth about everything, including the physical body, is made of energy. And we have to look at that first and foremost and understand what that means and how it applies to our physical, mental, and emotional health. Simple as that.
Well, it's really cool. It's really interesting, and I can relate from similar experiences in my own personal and professional life. And so it gives me this feeling of sort of being a bridge between one world you invoked, which is I came out of a medical family also, very, I would say, about diagnosis and medication and higher education and
Yes.
that. But I always found over the years that I was having these experiences that might be described Jungian synchronicity, about these uncanny connections between things or intuitive
Yes.
moments. So I was always very intrigued by that.
Yes.
And then, so now I'm at the point where functional medicine has this whole world of things that we can illuminate for folks. What about this? What about that?
Mhm.
And maybe what we should do next is your website's loaded with tons of great information, including lots and lots of anecdotes. But maybe give an example if somebody does your program or benefits from this kind of work.
Mhm.
What can they expect? Like,
Yeah.
is it how, including things like dosing, right? If somebody's energy helps somebody else get pain relief, how long does the dose last? Do they need another dose?
Interesting question. Very interesting question. Yeah. Okay. So there's a wide range of possibilities, and everyone's case is very unique, and yet there are some commonalities. And but I'm very hesitant to say you do this, it takes this long, you do it this many times. It just doesn't work like that. We are quite interesting combinations of experiences that are have been, have a cumulative effect from the moment we're born, even pre-birth, and how that puzzle mixes together creates what you're experiencing in the here and now. And so, examples of what's possible, everything from on the mild extreme of, well, that was very relaxing and I slept better than I have in years. I would say that's a mild experience. But for someone who hasn't slept in 12 years, they're ecstatic because there were no sleep aids, no dangerous drugs, and they slept through the night and no one touched them. No one did anything. They didn't swallow anything. It was quite extraordinary. For the majority of people, that's the first thing they notice.
Mhm.
The other extreme, Deborah, I've had 30 years of pain from head to toe. I've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, arthritis, chronic fatigue syndrome. My thyroid doesn't work. I have digestive issues. Okay, the other extreme is, Deborah, in less than an hour, I am 100% pain free. I have never felt this good. My energy's back. I feel like I could just conquer the world. Um, this is the range and
Mhm.
everything in between. Now, I
Mhm.
will say, on average, I discovered over time, there is a cumulative effect. Even though the majority of people will notice relief and changes in the very first session, if they will commit to at least 4 sessions, there's a stronger chance that they will hold the dose, as you say. It's not a dose, but they will
Right.
hold the new pattern that I'm able to bring in for them that they're not able to access on their own. And
Mm.
this is the key, is that we want to interrupt the old patterns that are thoughts, that are habits of thought, habits of emotions, habits of actions, and that are energetic and that are in their field and very clear to me because I can find them in seconds, but I can help interrupt them in a way that doesn't take years, that's 100% safe, that doesn't require them to swallow a pill of any kind or change their food and give up all the foods they love. Now, I've worked with people with, as I said, a wide range of labels. I'm not a big fan of the labels because the labels increase their belief in disease. And that's one of the first things I help people unlearn, is that your belief in disease is contributing energy to the very fire that you're trying to put out.
Mhm.
Everything's a pattern, a vibrational, energetic pattern. Think of it like music. So I've been able to help people with the pattern of addiction to drugs, addiction to gambling, anxiety, panic attacks. I've been able to help people who have had trauma from accidents, injuries, skiing accidents, sexual abuse, violence, neglect, These are patterns that most people, if they try to fix or figure out, would spend a lifetime and maybe get a little bit of relief, and
Mhm.
most likely be living on some kind of medications. I've seen people with severe trauma, the type of trauma you just can't even believe it's possible that someone lived through this.
Mhm.
And they're not on drugs, they're not on supplements, they're sleeping through the night, they're free of it, and often in a very short few weeks, which is very challenging for people to wrap their mind around, and without triggering the trauma.
Mhm.
So it's very exciting what's possible. People have come to me with tumors and cysts and been told they have very aggressive cancers. Again, I'm not here to make any guarantees. I'm not a doctor. I don't treat symptoms. But what I've seen is that the body is designed to heal. I don't care how long you've had it, how severe it is. If you're in a safe space with the right tools and someone to help you,
Mhm.
everything's possible.
Mm.
Everything.
Well, it raises so many questions. I want to learn more about it. I'm sure our audience does too, and I thank them for joining us. So, do some people do this type of healing on their own, and then you and I end up working with the ones who don't? Is this a self-selecting audience, the people that seek you and me out because they didn't change their energy on their own through starting to meditate or getting into a healthier marriage or running or getting out in nature? How's that work?
That's a great question. So it's a variety of people show up on my doorstep. I would say right now, and this is only because of the current state of education in our world, that the availability of this is not that familiar to people. So mostly what happens is someone goes the conventional route. They look for the cut it out, drug it out solution. They try that. They either get a list of side effects that scare the hell out of them, or they start taking medications that sometimes are highly dangerous and addicting. Then they say, this isn't even working. I have more pain or I have a new symptom. So they get tired of that and they start seeking natural solutions. And then this what they tell me is that they're now taking handfuls of supplements. They've changed and eliminated almost every food on the list that they love. They don't know what to do because they're not sure anything's really working, but they're afraid to stop what they've been told to do to create a healthy lifestyle. They're
Mhm.
thinking positive, they're meditating, they're exercising, but they're not noticing the pain or the symptoms of their disease going away. Then they start seeking really out of the box. That's how many people find me. But you can start finding me at any stage of the game. And I would recommend that even if you decide to do something very conservative and conventional, you can do this as an adjunct along with. And this is known for speeding up the healing process. So, there's not
Yeah,
a one type fits all.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe 100 years from now, you and I will both have folks coming to our approaches sooner, or 10 years from now, or
10 years from
if,
now,
yeah,
max. And this should be the
yeah,
first step, not the last. Because
yeah.
if you really knew, and by the way, I should mention, I've been in a scientific research lab more than once.
Hmm.
We have seen measurable proof that people with a long list of labels get results. In fact, I've been told by one research lab that I was able to provide 6 times the pain decrease and the energy increase of any method they had studied. And that the average improvement was 10%, and I got 67% measurable. And the people that I worked on said they got 99% that they could experience change for the better.
Mm-hmm.
So I also think part of the problem is that we don't have the equipment available in the average medical office that even understands how to measure this and what we're measuring. And I'm not even sure that something's been invented yet that can fully measure what's going
Hmm.
on. So, it's interesting, but people do find the people that are ready, they do find it, and that
Hmm.
are open and that are willing. And I'll say a lot of them, they're not believers. They don't look for this type of solution. Somebody tells them about it, or they happen to do some Dr. Google research and they find something they weren't expecting. And they're very skeptical, and rightly so, but they're willing to try it.
Mhm.
That's the key. You have to be
Mm.
willing to have an experience. I'm not here to convince people of something they don't believe in and to become a believer. It doesn't require belief. It requires willingness to try something that you haven't done before that's safer than having someone cut into you or taking certain medications that could
Mhm.
really have potential negative effects.
Well, I appreciate you sharing the quantification. I think that's really interesting, an interesting and important question, and also that this question of whether people need to believe versus being open-minded. I'm sure that's going to help some folks just know that what they need to be prepared to ante up with. And I think open-mindedness is a
Yeah.
really fair and reasonable quality to ask for from anyone in any interaction. It's a good quality to have to bring to life and living.
It's true. However, also have learned that most people are not aware how not open-minded they are. They feel open-minded,
Mhm.
but they're actually really afraid and filled with conditioned thinking and been hypnotized in a way they don't even recognize. My toughest job with many cases is helping them really see how their way of thinking, their habitual way of thinking, is contributing to the problem, and that
Mhm.
they have a very limited view of what's possible, what's true. They have a lot of ideas that they believe are true that are not,
Mhm.
and it's really quite a process, and people can only take in so much of that at a time in a time frame that they're willing and able. Most people say, Deborah, please, I'd like everything to change. But if and when that happens, it scares them. So
Mhm.
most people actually do better slower than
Mm.
faster. They want
Mm.
fast, but
Mhm.
they're not ready to handle fast.
That makes a ton of sense to me relative to what I see in my practice, given that the reported narrative is I want to be as well as I can as quickly as I can.
Right.
But many of us, myself included, don't realize how much our identity is entwined in our existing problems and our
Exactly.
suffering and our setbacks and our kind of gritty story.
Exactly.
And we
And
worry we'll lose ourselves if we don't have our narrative.
it's actually terrifying. People think they're going to physically die when they lose the identity with their disease, their labels, their who they think they are. And it is a story, and I'm not negating it or minimizing it in any way. It's an important story. It needs to be heard, it needs to be witnessed, and it needs
Mhm.
to be released.
Mm.
And it needs to be looked at from a new point of view.
Mm.
Because otherwise, if they're identified with it, there's no space between. I always say to people, you have a body, but you are not a body. That's like saying, I am my car. But people get very identified with their
Mhm.
vehicle.
Mhm.
And then there's no space between it. So they don't really get a viewpoint that allows for change to occur naturally, swiftly, organically, because
Mhm.
they're too identified with it. So
Mhm.
I have to help people get that space and discover who they really are, which is not a body. And then the other key piece that nobody wants to talk about are emotions. And we would not be doing people justice to not bring that up if we didn't bring that up, because this is something that's been for decades, oh, leave that over there. We're not going to talk about emotions. We're not going to bring those feelings here. That's dangerous territory for practitioners and for patients. And yet it is often the key that unlocks the door, unlocks the entire health puzzle.
Mm. I should note, as I was getting ready for today's interview, I was reviewing some descriptions you had for people about different things for different people, but how for you, yoga and meditation
Yeah.
has been really powerful. And I particularly resonated with your comment around being in nature or meditating, that then we become aware of during the quiet, we become aware of who we are and what we're feeling. And that's certainly been my experience with meditation. And one of the things that's helped me most is from Thich Nhat Hanh's mindfulness community, where he encourages everything that arises that we envision holding it like a precious little baby. And it
Yes, I
sounds
love that.
sounds kind of silly until I tried the practice. And so when my irritability would arise, I would say, "Oh, hello, my precious irritability, I'm there for you," and then joy and anger, frustration, fatigue, et cetera, as these things arise and dissipate, being in a flow state with them is very different than them sort of running in the background or shoved off to the side.
Very different. It's not an escape hatch, is what I say to people. That really, if we want to heal, we must learn to feel. We must learn to embrace all the colors in the crayon box, and not say, "Oh, only yellow here, only red is welcome here." That just won't fly long term.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that, and I love how you brought up the word silence, because most people are running from the quiet they need because of what will come up when they sit still and stop scrolling. And what will happen is the answers, which are inside of each and every one of you listening, they will emerge. Now, will you know what to do with them? Maybe not. Will you trust them? Probably not. But when you have a guide there with you who's not afraid and knows what to do, you can discover your answers are inside of you. It's not being kept from you. It's not a punishment. It's not your karma. You really do have the solutions, but you have to learn to listen in a new way, and you have to sit still long enough to allow this to come up and then learn what to do with what comes up.
Yeah, I love that. That makes a ton of sense.
There's so much information everywhere, but
It's good news.
until we get the conditioned mind out of the way, the disturbed emotions out of the way that are unresolved, and we clean up that energy field, we are only looking at what we've learned, but that's the wrong place to look.
Well, let's do a couple of nuts and bolts things that I think our audience will probably find intriguing and or helpful. So for me, the way I can relate to this as non-local physics is this idea, we know about what's called quantum entanglement. And so two entangled particles in quantum physics will behave the same way, whether they're a foot apart or one of them's here and the other one's out by Saturn. And this is the state of physics at this time. And so I think for me and others, one watershed moment is saying, if this is what's happening at the fundamental level of matter, that things are connected in ways we don't understand, non-local meaning the two particles are connected regardless of their distance, then it starts to emerge why a person can be in New York and do some activity deliberately for the well-being of a person in Ohio. From a non-local physics perspective, it doesn't matter where the two entities are. It matters that they are related. Is this accurate?
Yes, and
it's okay if it's not, because that's as far as I've gotten with
I'm not a
my
physicist.
scratching on a napkin.
Yeah, no. I think what people need to really recognize is that we are all always interconnected to everyone and everything. We have not been taught that. We're taught that we're a separate identity. Couldn't be further from the truth. We are all interconnected. We and our thoughts and our emotions are as real as electricity, and they're working all the time, whether you're conscious of it or not. So most people are walking around with power tools that are turned on, but they don't know it. So we have to get people to become more awake and aware of, oh, I've got tools and I'm using them, but I didn't realize it. No wonder I've got, holes. I'm causing a problem. It's a lot to do with resonance and the fact that we're living in a gigantic field that we're all in together. Information's constantly going into that field, and we're picking up information from that field. It has nothing to do with time and space. And it has to do with resonance. So resonance is often based on what we've learned and believed to be true. It's why you find yourself with certain friends, with watching certain programs, why you like certain people immediately and others who you've never met, you get a bad vibe.
Mhm.
There's constant information. It's vibrational. We're processing it and feeling it all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. And I also like to uh, give people the example of cable TV, because you're dialed into one channel. And it's like saying you only knew you had channel 10 and you've only watched channel 10 your entire life. And then a friend comes over and says, "Oh my God, turn on channel 12. There's the most amazing program on there." And you say, "Channel 12? What are you talking about?" You have 100 stations at different frequencies. And if you change the frequency, you're going to get an entirely different reality.
Mm,
We're living in that cable show. We're
mhm,
living depending on the frequency we're dialed into, which has to do with your beliefs and with your conditioning. So
mhm,
that reality can change instantly. It's nothing to do with time and space. It has to do with frequency, vibration. And that's what's so exciting, because it's the key to both health or sickness, depending on what frequency you're dialed into. And
mm.
everything's changeable and everything is vibration. And we can change it whether you're in Alaska, Saturn, or in my backyard.
Oh, sometimes I just have to stop and take a breath because it's so cool
Exactly.
what
It
we get
is.
to talk about in these
It's so
podcasts.
exciting. And, again, people, I know it's out of the box for some people, but if you could just, with the grain of a mustard seed, open your mind, you don't have to accept it all instantly. I'm not
Mhm,
asking for that, but just be
mhm,
open to the possibility that the way you have viewed your health and how healing works, there's another option. I'm not
mhm,
trying to take anything away from anyone.
mhm,
The options you've had will always be there. You can always go back to them. I'm saying there's another window. Let's look out that window just for a moment. Try it on, see how you feel, see what experience you have. Then make a new decision based on that
mm.
experience.
I love that invitation. That seems very resonant in itself. And I get a chance to ask you a couple questions I've always wanted to ask somebody with your skill set,
Okay.
and maybe our audience wants to know too. So a number of years ago, I became familiar with the work of Larry Dossey, an MD who was fascinated by, I think it probably was intuitive for him initially, that regardless of the faith practice,
Mhm.
that MD, because he's an MD, I think he studied MDs, but that MDs that prayed with their patients had better outcomes. And 3 or 4 books into his research and his career, he wrote a separate book, I think because he was really concerned about doctors who told somebody they weren't going to get well.
Mm.
Um, and he did some research on that too. And it's not, I think this is neglect, not malice, but uh, the but his research showed that those outcomes were poorer. So any of us who've ever said to somebody, "You're not going to get such and such," should take this probably as a cautionary tale that energetically we could be doing someone a disservice. But I'd love it if you'd comment then, who should we trust to
Mm.
resonate with our energy field? Is this
Oh,
something we
that's
need to think about?
a great question. We have definitely given doctors God status. And I would go so far to say, as words kill. I have had clients who felt amazing, who were hopeful about recovering, and were told, "You will never recover from this. You will die from this. You have 6 months to live." And overnight, measurable results for the worse occur. The power of words and belief is an absolute force, not to be messed with, and not to be used lightly. And I don't think that most practitioners do it on purpose. They're there to help people. They actually think by telling the truth as they know it, they're helping people deal with reality. but their reality is one limited viewpoint based on their training, and that's the problem. And so we go back to physics, where we know that everything's energy and everything is possible and everything is vibrating, which means it's changing constantly, which means it can and does change. So we say we do no harm, we want to do no harm, but we're not aware of how much harm we can do until we become very wide awake as to the impact we have. And I will say it goes further than just the words. It's the thoughts and the intentions. So this, you have to recognize the invisible realm, which is what thought, emotion, and intention is the precursor to the physical.
Mm.
The subtle energetic realm flows into and becomes the physical. It's back to physics for everything. And we're constantly affecting the outcome. The practitioner, the MD, whoever you're going to, is affecting the outcome based on their beliefs. So your brilliant question is, well, who do we trust? I would say this, and it's a bold statement, and I know it. Never trust anyone outside of yourself more than your own inner GPS. Now, it's a little tricky because if you have not worked through your conditioned way of thinking, you won't be able to determine right away what's your conditioning and what's your truth. But I will say this, you can sort through that with the right mentor. And once you do, you'll recognize this higher source, call it intuition, God, universe, divine mind, call it whatever you want, physics, the matrix, the 0 point field, call it whatever you want. There is much more information available to you than what you've learned in any book, school, or from any person. And it will defy what you believe to be true. And when you have those experiences and when you have that type of information, it's a knowing that's different than thinking and believing. Knowing is not the same as thinking and believing. So when you go to someone, you must be very careful what information you're allowing in, because it will affect you. So I do believe there are experts that do have information that can help all of us. I don't, I will go to, but I'm very careful. I'm one of the biggest skeptics in town. So I'm very cautious and careful whose information I let in. But let's go back to the resonance we were talking about before, because what will happen is if someone says something to you that you absolutely is not true for you, you're going to feel it. You're going to say, I don't know about that. The contrary is also true. When someone speaks truth that is true for you, you will resonate with it and you'll go, I knew that was the case. I knew that was the answer. And I bet you everyone in our listening audience has had the experience where they've said to themselves, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Or I knew I should do that. I'm so glad I did that. How did you know? Because you resonated with the truth that's inside of you. You will feel it. You will know it on a deeper level than just what Google told you was the right thing to do. This is physics, and we're hardwired in our DNA. We're coded with truth, but it requires sometimes going against the smartest person in the room, the most educated advice. And sometimes the truth is challenging for people because we have not been raised to trust our inner technology. We've been taught to trust the expert, the most educated, the outer technology. Am I making sense here?
Oh yeah. I'm flooding with things that I'm thinking about from over the years, and I need to acknowledge that there were times that I shared with people early in my career what I thought was a necessary or helpful truth, and I think that I had some of those same impacts that Larry Dossey's describing, and so probably honestly, part of why I care about it so much is because it's poignant for me.
Yeah.
And now when I have somebody come in with a cancer diagnosis or heart failure or uh, overwhelming autoimmunity,
Yes.
I think what we're doing is what my friend in Montana used to describe as radical acceptance of what is. I think we're resonating with what is, but I'm super, super careful to frame it as, well, let's do these things and we'll see. Really, really careful around. I don't give people their odds. I
Yes.
don't do those sorts of things. And I also encourage them, if things are challenging, to resonate with that too. Go ahead and connect to what's happening. Some of the messages you need are in this state of being
Absolutely.
that you're in.
Absolutely. I always say there's a message in your pain. Your whatever type of pain or disease you're experiencing, it's your friend. Now people roll their eyes. What do you mean? How can it be my friend? I want to get rid of it. Stop it. Show me what to do. No, you want to learn from it because there's something going on that has put you out of ease and in dis-ease. That's not our natural state. And we want to learn from it so we can go back into what is our natural state
Hmm.
and not be
Yeah.
afraid to live life and try to always be on guard and protect and live in fear. That's going to tank your immune system in the fastest way possible.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I love that. Well, like a lot of thought leaders, I have about 3 days worth of things I want to go through, but there's two I really want to make sure and flag while we have you. So one is that I wanted to acknowledge that I think this is a theme in my life and what I have to share with patients at this point in my career, because probably one of those resonant circumstances is that the coach that I work with on this class we're preparing in functional medicine is a minimalist, Heather Ardema.
Mhm.
And our class has a process where we encourage people as their first step to stop and listen, get
Mm.
into a state of peace and stop and listen. And so I think this is a reiterative theme in the midst of this busyness. If people take nothing else away, to stop and take a deep breath and
Yes.
listen and be, whatever that means for them,
Mm.
it just seems like it's such an important yang to the yin of busyness and tasking and all that stuff we do. And then you mentioned you have clients in Alaska and you've
Yeah.
noticed that their time in nature
Yeah.
affects their energies or their receptivity. And I thought this is worth flagging too, that if we can be out in nature, it's deeply therapeutic. Should we wrap up on that?
Oh my goodness. I love both of these points that you're bringing up. I would say, go so far as to say the silence is a must, a requirement. And if you want to do that alone in your easy chair or out in nature, either one but it's a must. It's a prerequisite for all health, whether it's physical, whether it's with your relationships, whether it's with your career, your sense of purpose, your finances, your romances. You've got to have that silence to be able to deeply listen to what's coming up. There's no better place to facilitate that than in nature. Nature emits the exact frequency that we need to stay resonant and in tune with our natural state. We don't think of ourselves as being part of nature because most people are cut off, living in a high rise, putting on plastic shoes, getting in a car, not touching the earth with their bare feet for decades. Nature is a powerful healer. It is a force of healing 24/7 and has so much to teach us. And when you go in nature and you start listening, you recognize you're connected, more connected to a huge amount of information. And you're hearing it, you're seeing it, you're sensing it, you're feeling it. And there's probably many other senses we're not even aware we have that we can tap into more quickly by being in nature. If nature's not readily available, you can even look out a window, literally, at something alive, bring plants into your home. Now, you mentioned Alaska. I do have quite a few clients in Alaska who have had incredible experiences. After I started working with them, they noticed more information. And here's what's interesting. deeper interaction with nature when they would go back out into the woods or the wilderness, they started recognizing that nature's communicating with us all the time, and it's a two-way communication.
Mm,
And we might think of this as spiritual, but it's really back to physics and back to just nature that we
mm,
get cut off from because we're not in it enough.
mm,
So they started noticing and thinking, it's, you brought up earlier, these synchronicities, these experiences. They started noticing this more often. And that at first they were taken aback and said things like, Deborah, was I imagining things? I could have sworn nature answered my question and spoke to me, or I just knew the answer once I got out in nature. Or they started on purpose to see if they could get a response. And I would say the entire cosmos is speaking to you all the time if you're willing to speak to it and you're open to the answers. And you asked me earlier, who do you trust? Trust the cosmos, trust nature. Sit and have a dialogue like you would when you were, if you were trying to develop a relationship with a friend. Build a relationship with nature, and you will most likely be blown away. You will most likely have a lot revealed to you. You might question it at first. That's perfectly fine, but you will. And I encourage you to stick with it till you have at least one powerful experience. And then I would go so far as to say this may become your everyday experience if you're open and willing. You don't have to sit on a mountaintop at 4 a.m. in a lotus position and meditate in a formal way. Go out in nature alone and start to discover you're never alone. And that's what I would say would be the best thing you could ever do for your health or any area of your life.
mm. I'm so grateful to take this rich journey with you today. I feel like we got to cover so much ground. Just
It's
really, really grateful.
Thank you so much. And gratitude right back at you for being who you are, for being willing to be an MD and go outside the box. This is what we need. We trust you. We've been trained to trust you. We need your voice, your opinion, and your out of the box thinking. So thank you so much for helping me get the word out of what's possible for people in a bigger way. I'm just so grateful to you.
Mm, mm. Well, reciprocal gratitude. That's a good synergy in itself. And folks can, via the show notes and what have you, they can find your website and different resources. They could do programs or read your book or work with you. So there's all kinds of avenues for them to take the next step.
Absolutely. I welcome everyone to reach out. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today.
Delighted. Have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.